Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alec Reed. This is my channel Alec Reed, and today we are reading a new story called A Dream. I do want to say a couple things before I jump into this video. I want to put warnings. There will be some sensitive subjects mentioned, such as abuse, depression, rape, panic attacks. There is many sensitive topics. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you think is a bit too much for this story, and whether you would like a different story to be read, because I can always do that. So it was number 3 in the drarry fan fiction area. So I am just trying to find another drarry story, but I know that these are a lot of sensitive topics, and that these are things that some people have a hard time with. So let me know in the comments if that is a bit too much for this story. Also, I would like to let you guys know that my new posting schedule is Mondays and Fridays. Although this week I don't know if I'm going to get it done because I have a concussion. And I also totally thought it was Tuesday, and it's not Tuesday. So yeah, let's jump right into the video. Chapter 1. Harry Potter sat peacefully in a common room somewhere within the walls of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He stared into the steady flames of the sparking fire before him, willing his eyes not to droop and force him into another of his awful nightmares. The night was no later than 2 or 3 in the morning. His previous nightmare endeavor consisted of the usual events: Voldemort winning the war, everyone he loves dying, himself dying, etc. He knew this dream like the back of his hand. It would always end the same, no matter what he does. He thought back to the actual war, recalling the deaths of his loved ones: Remus, Tonks, Dobby, Cullen, and even Snape. He hated the fact so many died for him. He was only one person, but thousands of innocent people lost their lives for some stupid child. He leaned forward in his seat and rubbed his eyes as tears cascaded down his rosy cheeks. The feeling of sadness was always going to be stubborn in his mind, and it would always be endless. The amount of fake smiles and laughs he had pulled were countless, especially when compared to the amount of times he cried. He once again looked into the fire, remembering the times he fire-called Sirius, and the stories he would tell Harry of his father. Harry smiled at the memory as the tears streamed down his face. He wiped them aggressively again, and held his hands over his eyes, trying to calm himself. Harry took a few deep breaths, and suddenly felt a dip beside him in the sofa. He didn't feel the need to put his hands away from his eyes, only expecting it to be Hermione or Ron. They were the only ones who knew his nightmares and how they affected him. "What?" Harry said firmly, wiping his cheeks. He looked up and locked eyes with Grey ones. He definitely knew neither Ron or Hermione had gray eyes. However, he thought they were beautiful. Harry looked away from the eyes of the only person he dragged his eyes over their other features: high cheekbones, defined bone structure, a strong, sharp jaw, pointy nose, and most of all, the platinum blonde hair. Just as Harry was about to speak, the boy lifted his hand to Harry's cheek. He ran his cold, smooth fingers on the glistening tear tracks down his cheeks. There, caressed his red-stained cheeks. "What are you doing?" Harry whispered, trying to pull away, but the other quickly pulled Harry's chin towards him. He gulped silently. The boy did not speak a word, and only admired the black-haired boy in front of him. Harry was so confused. Why was he here? How did he get here in the middle of the night? Why was he here right now? The blonde stared deeply into the emerald eyes of the boy. He smiled as if he was solving a difficult arithmetic question. Harry had no clue why he was looking at him like that, but in the next second he did not care in the slightest. The taller boy smashed his lips onto Harry's with force and passion. Startled at first, Harry froze, but quite quickly melted into the sweet touch as his eyes fluttered shut. Their lips moved perfectly against each other. The other swiped his tongue again along the bottom lip of Harry's, and to his own surprise, he obliged. They explored each other's mouths, and Harry released a small moan, which made the taller boy grip Harry's waist in desperation. The boy slipped his arms around the smaller boy's waist as Harry pulled at the desperate hairs on the back of the blonde's neck. The blonde one quickly dominated Harry. He placed another peck to the boy's lips before making his way down Harry's neck. He pulled at the skin, making marks. The younger boy's breath hitched, and he groaned when the other bit lightly at his collarbone. Malfoy. He shot awake. What the fuck was that? Harry's eyes widened as his brain recalled the dream. His hand flew to his neck, remembering the sweet kisses Malfoy left, and his fingers touched his lips, still feeling the pressure of the other boy's. His breathing quickened slightly as his mind went into almost an anxiety attack. He snapped out of his daze, pushing the dream to a corner of his brain by the adorable blue-haired toddler, Edward Lupin, or more commonly known as Teddy. The young child was only 9 months old when his parents were killed in the war. Harry, as his godfather, was left with him, and since he himself was only 17 at the time, so it wasn't exactly legal. So Molly and Arthur gladly welcomed them at the burrow. Harry walked over to Teddy in his little playpen where the baby was trying to crawl. Teddy always seemed to calm Harry down. Even if the thought of looking after a baby was stressful, it wasn't to Harry. Hey, Teds. Harry smiled sweetly, picking up the young boy, and walked over to the sofa again. He placed him on his chest as he went back to the laying position he was in before. Now the two were laying in the living of the burrow, while the rest were in the woods having a small picnic. Harry just didn't feel like it was his birthday tomorrow, and since he became friends with the Weasleys, he knew all about the wild parties they celebrated for all the family's 18th birthdays. Teddy and Harry were like father and son, although, because Harry was so close with Remus, he didn't want Teddy to call him Dad. They stuck with Baba. Teddy had once called him Dada. It was his first word. Harry and Teddy soon fell asleep in the position they were in. Harry held Teddy tightly against his chest. Happy birthday, Harry! Harry woke up with a start. He looked around to see the Weasleys laughing at his shocked face and Hermione giggling with little Teddy in her arms. Somehow he had moved from the sofa to his bed, so a confused front flashed across his face. If you were wondering, me and Fred moved you here when we got back. The twins smiled at Harry, knowing what he was thinking. He adored the two of them. He chuckled and said, "Thank you, guys." They smiled in return. He turned to Hermione and held out his arms for sleepy Teddy, resting his head on his shoulder. Teddy giggling as he was passed to Harry. Hey, Teddy. He smiled when the little boy snuggled into his shoulder. Harry couldn't believe he was turning 1 next month. He was terrified because he knew the boy would start talking soon, walking and throwing tantrums. Soon the family was going into the living, and Harry saw a couple of presents laid neatly on the floor next to the chair. He smiled and turned to Molly, mumbling a quiet thank you. She smiled at him and pulled him into a hug, kissing his cheek like only a mother would. He walked over and sat on the chair, bouncing Teddy on his leg. The baby giggled, reached down for the presents below him. Harry smiled and grabbed one of his teething toys from beside the chair. He gently handed it to Teddy, and the child put it straight into his mouth. Harry grinned and turned to his presents. He reached one of them. He read each one carefully and thanked the person who it was from. He got a fancy watch and a new book from Hermione, a bottle of butterbeer and a tank from Ron, a bunch of sweets and chocolate, and a few joke products from the twins, a broom from Molly and Arthur, and a new Quidditch gloves and boots from Jenny. He got cards stuffed with a few galleons from Bill and Charlie since they weren't there. Harry hugged them all. Hugging Ginny was slightly awkward since they broke up not too long ago. Jenny told Harry that she was questioning her sexuality, and it turns out she's a lesbian. Luckily, everyone accepts her and Harry as it was okay. He obviously was upset, but he was also questioning his sexuality, but wasn't ready to tell anyone just yet. After that, they went to go get breakfast. They all sat outside on the grass, eating a full English breakfast. Even Teddy had a small version of the plate. Harry chuckled lightly at all the beans across the baby's face. He grabbed a wipe and smiled lovingly as he wiped the baby's face. "You're a natural at that, Harry," a voice behind him said. He turned to see Hermione smirking. Harry blushed, flattered, and smiled at her. That night, after he put Teddy down, he was lying in his bed going over the events of today, and he came across the dream he had the previous night. He exhaled excessively before placing his hand over his stomach. Why did I kiss Draco? And of all people? He grimaced slightly. This mean I was... He wasn't ready to admit to himself yet. He rolled over with a confused look on his face. Suddenly, there was a loud slam on the window next to him. He jumped and almost leapt out of his bed. Harry stood up and looked at the small window just beside his bed. There was a brown, shaggy owl shaking his head, holding a few letters. Harry opened the window, a cold breeze slowly drifting in, and he grabbed the letters from the owl and gave it a small stroke before it left. He looked down at the letter. Mr. Harry J. Potter, The Burrow. Ottery St. Catchpole, Devon. There was only one place this letter could have come from. Hogwarts. Harry gasped quietly and ripped it open. He didn't read it fully, but basically it said he and his friends were to return to Hogwarts to repeat their final year. Harry's jaw dropped. He was shocked. He took a deep breath before tiptoeing to Hermione's room. He pushed the door open. It cracked slightly. "Hermione," he yelled. She shuffled in her bed before she sat up and rubbed her eyes, seeing the boy who lived with his head poking out behind the door. "Harry?" she asked groggily. What time is it?" Harry asked. Harry walked in with no words and handed her the letter. Her eyes skimmed it, and a smile grew on her face. "Oh, Merlin, Harry!" she squealed, obviously not caring for the other people in the house. Hermione jumped out of bed and threw her arms around Harry's neck, embracing him tightly. Harry gladly accepted the affection, wrapping his arms around her waist. He pulled her away, smiling brightly. "We're going back to Hogwarts." Harry. Chapter 2. The station was packed. People were everywhere, laughing, crying, and smiling, young witches and wizards running from their crying mothers and fathers, finding them extremely embarrassing. Harry smiled, even though his heart longed for that sort of love. A young witch, maybe in third year, ran past Harry and into the arms of her waiting best friends. They giggled, one of them pointing towards Harry. He pulled an awkward, tight smile, not knowing what else to do before turning around. Another wizard, only a couple years younger than Harry himself, was being squished by three younger sisters, the boy obviously jokingly trying to hold back a grin, which only made his sisters hug him more. Harry's heart warmed at the sight. He turned to Ron, who was holding Teddy, making silly faces, resulting in the baby giggling loudly. Molly grabbed Ron's arm from behind him, asking him to help Jenny and Hermione with their bags. He nodded and passed the baby to Harry. "Baba, Baba!" Teddy giggled and clapped his hands. Harry smiled and bounced him in his arms, knowing he'd be tired soon. He kissed his cheek and held up his fingers for the baby to grab onto. A loud whistle blew, echoing through the station. That was Harry's cue to get on the train before he missed it. His smile dropped, knowing he now had to leave the small boy. Handing Teddy to Molly, he smiled sadly and kissed the baby's forehead. He grabbed his bag and waved to Molly, Arthur, and Teddy as he stepped onto the train. Hermione and Ron were already inside, waving in one of those compartment windows. Suddenly, the train jumped into a start and left King's Cross. Harry sighed and made his way to the compartment with his best friends in it. He looked in the first compartments, seeing a few first years who gazed back at him, and then looked in the one across from it, seeing 6-year girls whispering and blushing as the boy who lived had looked at them. Harry waved awkwardly and moved on. He looked around as he walked further down the train. Though looking down wasn't the best idea when you were as short as he was, he bumped into someone, obviously much taller than him. He stumbled back while the other person stood perfectly still. "Oh, I'm so sorry." Harry looked up, to be met with the silvery eyes and a pale face, a face that belonged to Draco Malfoy, dressed in a pristine black suit, hair slicked back, with just a few strands dangling on his forehead, polished black shoes, and the famous Malfoy ring sitting perfectly along his slim fingers. Draco Malfoy was his childhood enemy. They had hated each other from the very beginning. The boys insulted each other and every name under the sun, and got into a few physical fights. Hopefully they had both grown up and had gotten past the physical fighting stage. Both found that childish. Harry's mind quickly flushed at the memory of the dream he had that hadn't stopped thinking about since then. He looked back to Draco, his eyes remembering the admiration in them in the dream. He quickly shook his head, realizing what he was doing. "Careful, Potter." He smirked maniacally. He chuckled and pushed his way past Harry before he could retort. Malfoy's goons, Pansy Parkinson and Blaise Zabini, shoved him in each shoulder before trailing behind their leader, both of them smirking at the golden boy too. Harry rolled his eyes and walked a little further before turning right into the compartment, the one with Hermione and Ron inside. "There you are, Harry," Hermione sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. Harry smiled and set his bag on the rails above the seat, jumping slightly. Hermione picked up her book again, reading, and Ron continued whatever weird Ron thing he was doing before. Harry pulled a small black sketchbook and a worn-down pencil from his smaller bag beside him, and sat down with his feet upon the seat. He sighed and began drawing Hermione, since she was behind his knees, and she was stuffing her face with chocolate frogs. He got the details of her thick leather book in her hands, each strand of her bushy brunette hair, and every single freckle on her face. He poked his tongue in between his teeth, concentrating, peeking over his book every few minutes, trying to make sure he got most of the details correct. He blushed of embarrassment once she got him after almost 4 hours. "What are you doing?" She laughed and moved to see over the younger boy's legs. Harry smiled and quickly put it face down on his chest. "Hey!" She smirked playfully. What is it? She said softly, slowly convincing the boy to let her see. Harry sighed and gave her the sketch book reluctantly and hid his red face in his hands. He heard Hermione say, Harry, this is amazing. Harry pulled his hands from his face and uttered, I guess. You guess? She mocked him playfully. Ronald, look. She shoved the book into her boyfriend's hands. What? Whoa, mate. His eyes widened as he stared at the amazing drawing before him. Ron smiled and passed it back to Harry. Harry smiled at the very prominent blush on his cheeks. I normally draw flowers, but I was bored, so I drew you, Hermione. He mumbled. He looked at the drawing once more before handing it to Hermione. Here, keep it. Really? Her eyes lit up and grinned as she took the drawing and examined it over and over. To her, it was a fascinating piece of art. Harry nodded and chuckled. He sat back down and rested his head back, hoping to get even just a bit of sleep. Draco! Draco woke up with a start. He glared and turned to whoever woke him up from his slumber, Pansy Parkinson. Christ, Pansy, can't you just let me sleep? He began, but she cut him off. I'm just saying you need to change into your uniform. She rolled her eyes. Pansy and Draco had become much closer after he'd come out as gay. Yes, that's right. The ex-Death Eater, Draco Malfoy, was extremely gay. All right. He sighed and made his way to the bathroom on the other end of the train after grabbing his Slytherin robes from his bag. After he walked down the aisle, he caught a glimpse of a certain sleeping boy, already dressed in his uniform. He looked peaceful and quite cute. What was he thinking? You're gay as fuck, but no way. He shook his head and carried on walking. Draco changed very quickly and walked back to his compartment. He arrived back to his compartment. He saw Blaise chatting up a few girls a couple doors down. Draco rolled his eyes and slid the door open. Will he ever learn? He's gayer than me. Actually, he's bisexual. Pansy smiled, applying some light powder to her already caked-on face. Sure, we both know he's been crushing on that weasel since 4th year. Draco said with a smile, with as much disgust as he could. He sighed and sat down across from the girl. Well, aren't you, obsessed with Potter? Pansy smirked and bit her lip, knowing she hit a nerve with the blonde. He glared at her and said, How dare you? That boy is horrid. Personality and looks. He faked gagged and looked out the window. You're just in denial, darling. Pansy closed her powder pack with a snap and stuffed it into her pocket. Sure, Pansy. Whatever. Finally, we're here. Draco groaned as the train came to a sudden stop. He stood up and grabbed his bag as if it was nothing. Over the summer, he had been working out quite a lot. He also went traveling to France, Spain, Denmark, and Germany, staying at the many holiday homes that the Malfoys owned. Draco did it to clear his head from the war. He stayed with his mother for the whole of June, and then went traveling all of July and most of August. He loved every second. Draco also dyed his hair blue, although he quickly got rid of it. His mother laughed at his appearance. A genuine laugh, something he hasn't heard since he was a child. Come on, Dray. Pansy nudged his shoulder softly, making her way off the train. He followed behind her, getting weird looks from the younger years, some scowling, some filled with fear. He sighed. They were at the exit of the train when Pansy saw Blaise once again chatting up a Ravenclaw boy. He was tanned, with red rosy cheeks and dark brown hair. Pansy rolled her eyes and grabbed the back collar. Sorry to interrupt your flirt fest, but some of us would like to go eat. She smiled tightly at the Ravenclaw before she walked away, still pulling on Blaise's collar. Oh, come on, Pans. I was only having a little fun with him. He smirked. Pansy just shoved him away and walked off the train, being engulfed by the smoke from it. She coughed slightly into her elbow, turning her head and seeing the golden trio. He followed her gaze and saw her eyes suddenly sadden. Fucking goody two-shoes, Potter, Draco snarled, stepping off the train. Blaze got off after Draco, both coughing, but since they were two of the tallest boys in the year, they could almost see over the smoke. Come on. What? I just want this year over with. Pansy grabbed the boys' wrists and pulled them towards the carriages. Wow, Pans. Thought this year would be amazing, Blaze explained sarcastically. Just shut the fuck up, Blaze. She sighed and let go of their wrists, finally when they were at the carriages, and shoved their bags into the already massive pile. Draco sighed. Well, won't this be a shit year? Alright, that is the end of today's episode. Next time we will be doing chapter 3. Just keep in mind of those warnings. There will be warnings throughout this entire series. I also have a new Heartstopper story coming up. So if you want to see that, let me know. It's still being updated and everything, and I'm still working on the details, but there will be a new one coming soon, so be prepared for that. Let me know if you want more than one drarry fanfiction, because I can do that too. But anyway, I post twice a week now, Mondays and Fridays. Make sure that you come back for the next episode on Monday? I think Monday. I'm not sure. I don't know what day this is going up on because I'm filming all at once. Anyway, like, subscribe, and comment down below, whether it's leaving recommendations or whether it's just saying hello. And then also, good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Goodbye, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody in between, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, friends.